if the Vatican has a pro-China position, we all have a problem. What happens most of the time is that China manages to get a foot into the door by capturing, enticing the ruling elites. So at various levels, through business, corruption, cultural influence, but also indirectly, so like using the role of the Vatican, in particular when it comes to the Catholic strata of the Italian elites. Okay, I'm not speaking of the bigger population, which is mostly China unfriendly or at least very diffident. You can look at China as the leader of a Eurasian bloc, which includes Russia, Iran, partly Pakistan, and a number of others. And so Eurasian influence in Italy is nothing new. We used to have the largest communist party in the West. The Soviet Union had a very strong presence in this part of the world. We are one of the least Russia unfriendly countries in the West, which is a problem, of course, but it is what it is. And if we speak of Russia, Russia's clout is due to historical factors, so like viscosity, like many old communists are still very close to Russia. They are nostalgic of the Soviet Union. Then there is a widespread anti-American sentiment, which of course is an additional element at play. The Vatican's well-known Ostpolitik, which means that their gaze directed towards Asia. And so like sometimes Russia closeness, Russia friendliness translates into China friendliness. That is one element. But then of course China has its own separate agenda. And it has vast resources, and it has a very holistic strategy, meaning that it covers the entire spectrum. It's not selective, it's not surgical. So like, unlike smaller countries or countries with more limited budgets, China seems to be interested in covering the entire spectrum. So from soft power to clandestine operations, corruption, whatever. The Chinese issue is super serious because of enduring Chinese influence in the Vatican and because of the Vatican's ability to influence Italy's institutions. So I think that the most alarming issue is indirect Chinese influence. Italy has always had head of states who are Catholics, and they talk on a daily basis to the Vatican. Also because they share the same geographical area, they're neighbors, so to say, and because Italian politics is so volatile, so basically we have so many changes of government, and because the Vatican is so stable, inevitably the influence of the Vatican is very strong. So I think that the Vatican influence in Italy is mainly an influence from top to top, basically from the Secretary of State of the Vatican to the Italian head of state, and from there to the bottom. It's a very mechanical issue. It's not particularly spiritual. But if you look at the public speeches of Italian heads of state or prime ministers, they always quote the Pope in their speeches.
Really?
Yes, and it's a big problem because we know that there was a time when the Vatican was a great force, a great anti-communist force. Pope John Paul II, for instance. But these days, with Pope Bergoglio in particular, the Vatican has forged very close ties to China with this super controversial deal, secret deal, and so basically for many years you had a China-friendly Vatican. Yes, that's what I mean. Let's make this very practical. Let's look at Giuseppe Conte. Okay, so Conte was, as we said earlier in the call, was the peak point of Chinese influence in Italy. Okay. And Conte is part of a Catholic community called Villa Nata. Basically, he would talk many times each day to the Secretary of State of the Vatican, who is the same man who negotiates the Vatican-China deal. So there you have a very, very clear link between China, the Vatican, and the Italian government. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
If the Vatican's position on China is fair or neutral or antagonistic, then we don't have a problem.
Wow.
But if the Vatican has a pro-China position, we all have a problem. And so we found ourselves deeply infiltrated with Chinese. And now, of course, there is an acute awareness that the world is not flat, that we have a struggle between the West and Eurasia and a few countries in between, like Middle East, Africa. And so clearly now things have changed, but the real question is not only being more aware of where you belong, who are your real friends and who are not. With Mario Draghi, we had a reawakening. So like Italy woke up from this big illusion of a Pax Sinica. Okay. And we ended up back where we belong in the Euro-Atlantic bloc. But it's not a given. We must remember where we belong. And so the question is, now that we had general elections and we have a new right-wing political majority, who in theory is Atlanticist, we will have to see whether it sticks to its promises. Giorgia Meloni, our Prime Minister, is a friend, cultivated ties to Taiwan, has made courageous statements in favor of Taiwan several times, repeatedly, publicly. And so she has exposed herself a lot. But of course, China can wait. Meloni met Xi Jinping in Bali. She accepted an invitation to visit China. China can play the long game. And I'm not sure that Italy, which is on the contrary, is not a patient operator, it's a highly volatile country. I think Italy should coordinate very strictly, very closely with its transatlantic allies. So whatever it does, it should agree in advance with the US. And it's the only way. If you lose the trust of your transatlantic allies, it's the beginning of the end.
大纪元时报遍布全球，不受财团、政党影响，真实敢言。不管是想了解国际局势、两岸议题，或者想要寓教于乐、丰富人生，您需要的都在大纪元时报。订报专线0800566688。